Player Will.
Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. A lot of you have been asking in the comments, both on the podcast and in my videos, Will and JB by extension, what do you guys think about Elder Awakening systems? What do you recommend? And I'm sure a lot of you are kind of surprised that we haven't done a lot of content around it so far, particularly considering that we're really known as like the math guys of the content creator community, if you will. And so this is a very high level, quick and dirty video on my thoughts on the Elder Awakening system of the vision cards. And so we'll recap real quickly what it exactly is. So the first thing is, for 175 Mog Battles, you can go into the vision card section of the Mog shop and you can acquire UR level, they call it Elder Awakening, materials, the Rainbow Writ in particular. Now they do have other versions if you go to the lower rarity vision cards that, let's say an MR vision card, well they have MR materials that you can purchase to upgrade them. So the UR ones cannot be applied to MR ones and vice versa. You have to buy them for their own rarity. Now, the second thing is holo vision cards are not eligible. Job vision cards are, mono element vision cards, and regular generic ones that came out pre all the system also are. Now, these do increase the main stats on the vision card, meaning if a card has 300 HP on it, there is an upgrade to that actual physical stat on the vision card. Here's the thing. We haven't actually figured out the rhyme or reason yet as to how much they increase, only that they do. Generally, observations show that the HP number grows by like 40% or so it's like an extra 100 or so change. A lot of the attack and magic stat values only increase by 20%, but they're not exactly the same. So we don't know 100% how that works, but just know that the main stats do increase. Now, the second thing is, the biggest thing, is that they also increase the percent that the attribute of the card retains when it's in the subslot. For instance, the Ifrit vision card, which is 50% attack. When you put it in the subslot, you would retain half of that, 50% of that, and that's just a number they picked. We've known about this forever since they, introduced subvision cards. And so you would get 25% attack down from 50, but what they're doing now is they're increasing how much that stat you retain. So for attack in particular, you now keep 60% of the total, not 50% of the total. So where you used to only get 25% attack, now you'll get 30% attack, because that's 60% of the initial. That's a lot of percents, I know. This gets crazy. But for those of you that are already a little intimidated by this, let me give you the very simple takeaways and breakdowns, then I'll talk through my thoughts as to why. So the first thing, yes, it is a form of power creep. Objectively speaking, these cards get stronger by the main card stats and the percent you retain on the subslot. No doubt about that. Number two, yes, you should awaken your vision cards if you have no use for those vision card Mog Medals. If you just acquired them, if you're up to date on the cards you want, yeah, you absolutely should be buying some of these to increase your vision cards. Now, that brings you to the third point. Well, which ones do you actually improve? And it's really a function of two things, and you don't have to think that hard about it, but you should focus on the standard AoE unit, definitely the agility ones. Those are generally the best vision cards overall that you use most frequently. But realistically speaking, just focus on vision cards you use the most. It's that simple. Because the last point is, no, this system is not a massive power creep upgrade. You don't need to sweat too much about how you awaken them and be, paralyzed by, oh man, I gotta min-max my resources here. No, none of these upgrades should affect any of your team building theory whatsoever. It's literally just a very small incremental power creep for those that can afford to awaken these vision cards. And even then, I would still go to say that it's not a massive power creep change. And so we're going to talk through very high level why I think that. And so this is just a general list. You can study this if you want, showing which stats, what they used to formerly retain in the subslot, and now when you awaken them, what do they retain in the subslot? So real quick thing here, two, I think, most noteworthy ones. Number one is the decreased skill activation time. This is actually going from 80% retained to 100% retained. Now, decreased skill activation time is always subjective to the caster. What you already have for cast time, you got to calculate breakpoints. There's a lot of math that goes into that. But the fact that you can now retain 100% of the cast time down actually is very nice. It should statistically allow for more breakpoints to be met. What those are, I'm not really sure, but just conceptually speaking, that's a good one. The other one is the status effect resistances, and there's not a lot of these in the cards, but I know the Wind Vision card, the Beloved Chocobo, technically has charm resistance on it. So now you can increase how much charm resistance you retain on the subslot to 100% of the value. Obviously, we know status effects are a major pain. That's actually a relatively nice one. But the rest of these really aren't moving necessarily by a ton. And just to kind of like highlight some of that, I have a second chart here. This is showing an example of a vision card that has one of these stats on the left, what the main slot of that stat is, what it formerly was, and what it is when you awaken it. So we'll look again at that Ifrit vision card example that I gave. That's the attack 50%. You used to retain 25%. Now you get 30%. And a lot of you probably look at that and go, wait a minute, Will, 30% attack in the subslot, that seems like a big upgrade from 25%. Go with me here. Average unit has about 400 base attack, right? Average attack unit. 25% of your 400 base attack is 100 attack stat. So they used to get 100 attack stat from this. Well, 30% of 400 is 120 attack stat. So now this increase will give them 20 more attack stat than they would formerly. I'm not going to lie, guys. 20 attack stat is not making or breaking 99% of your games. If your unit has 1600 attack, now they got 1620 attack, that's not going to do a whole lot. Even something like element attack or weapon attack, so for instance, wind attack up or slash attack up, you're going from 50% retained to 55% retained. So I'm using an example of the Keepers of the Crystal Vision card. This is a super old one. It's the Fire Attack 35, but it's a 35 mod. So I wanted to demonstrate the change. Well, when you put the Keepers of the Crystal in the subslot formerly, you would get 18 mod. Now you get 19 mod. 1 extra percent modifier when you have a character that's attacking you for 300% modifier total, and now it's 301% modifier total. Very negligible for what that does for overall damage. The most noteworthy ones are very likely the AoE res and the unit res, where those go from 30 to 35, and on average, those increase by a full 1% in the subslot, sometimes a little bit more than that. If it's a super high, I think the Seaside Showdown that is a 24 AoE res, I think that technically goes by 2% because of the rounding. So not all of them, some of them, very slightly more impactful than others. But again, you're talking a difference of 1 AoE res increase. So if you had a character that was 50 AoE res before, now they're 51 AoE res, is that really going to change your fight? No. And I could go down this list and make the same case for most of these. Even some of these that look like they might be large overall jumps, like the Ifrit Vision card. You know, I'm looking at something like the acquired AP of Clairvoyant Astrologer, where you used to get 28% acquired AP, now it's 32% acquired AP. Well, what does that realistically look like? Let's say you had a character, used a buff that generated 16 AP. Well, so formerly, that 16 AP would actually end up being 20. The game rounds down. But now, it'll give you 32% acquired AP. Gives you 21. Congratulations, you got 1 extra AP on that buff. I think the only other really noteworthy one theoretically could be the inherited, or could be the reaction block, where 80%, if you're talking about inherited wills, for instance, you're going from a 34% chance to a 38% chance to block reaction. That one's actually not that bad. An extra 4% chance is pretty decent. And so, yeah, again, is this power creep? Yes. Is it worth doing? Yes. It's sometimes the difference. Sure, 20 attack maybe is the difference between, finishing off an enemy once in a while or not. Absolutely. You should be participating in this. But to the extent, and I'll highlight the takeaways, to the extent that you're really losing sleep over, how do I prioritize and min-max this and that, it's really not going to change the outcome of your battles, particularly when you consider that if you're awakening stuff and your enemy is awakening stuff, most of those tend to offset each other. So if your enemy awakened their attack percent and you awakened your, slash resistance one, well, the 1% increase in slash resistance likely offsets the 20 extra attack they got. So all net effect, when you talk about total game balance, they're really proportionate to each other. And the only times you're really going to notice would likely be score related content, where yes, when people are sweating for high scores, these will likely make a difference for you. If you have no awakened vision cards and your enemy has all awakened vision cards, maybe you'll feel it, but even then I would tend to believe that there's other factors that are more likely influencing the outcome of your match, like reincarnations, like better toggles, like better trust stone passives and flexibility of what you've put on there for trust stones. You get the point. These are a micro component of how they should affect your matches. And so that's why JB and I haven't really done a whole deep dive on them, because there's really not a deep dive to do. I'm not at all considering any of these increases in my team building anymore. Just because all of a sudden I get 30% attack instead of 25% attack, that doesn't change my decision whether or not I would have the effort vision card in the sub slot. If it was there before, it should still be there now. It's just now it's a little bit better when it's there. Now, are there exceptions to this? Absolutely. There's likely to be, in the Dark Espers in particular, have seemed to be some good exceptions to this, where they do tend to have very strong unit stats, very strong general stats, and a lot more stats on the board of the main stats that, yes, a couple of these, disproportionately more effective than others. But again, in the total net effect of things, very minor in my opinion. So that's my overall takeaways. Just wanted to take away some of the stigma and the scariness and the unknowns around this. Hopefully this is insightful, informative. Obviously, good luck for those of you that are awakening them. Hopefully you find some usage with them. I'm sure you will. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to y'all later.